Coffee should never cost you your dignity. But when an exhausted black woman was publicly humiliated and escorted out of a luxury airport cafe for simply sitting at a table, the arrogant manager thought he'd won. He had no idea the casually dressed woman he just kicked out was the ruthless CEO of the holding company that owned his building's master lease. Less than 30 days later, he wouldn't just be fired, he'd be staring at her name in glowing neon letters above his former doors. Isabella Caldwell checked her gold Cartier watch, the only visible indicator of her true net worth, and released a long measured sigh. The departure boards at Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 were a sea of blinking red text. Her flight to London Heathrow, a crucial leg for a multi-billion-dollar merger she was spearheading, had just been pushed back another 4 hours due to severe weather over the Atlantic. At 42, Isabella, known as Josie to her inner circle, and the executioner to Wall Street, was a titan in the commercial real estate and hospitality sector. She was the founder and CEO of Caldwell Holdings, a private equity firm that quietly owned the ground beneath some of the most lucrative commercial spaces in North America. But today, she didn't look like a CEO. After a grueling 3-day summit in Seattle, she had traded her customary Tom Ford power suits for comfort a pair of high-end but unassuming heather gray cashmere sweatpants, pristine white sneakers, and an oversized black hoodie pulled up to shield her face from the harsh fluorescent lighting of the terminal. She was operating on 3 hours of sleep, and she desperately needed 2 things: a strong black espresso and a quiet corner to review a heavily redacted stack of legal contracts. Navigating through the chaotic throngs of frustrated travelers, her eyes landed on an oasis of polished brass, dark mahogany, and emerald green velvet. L'Artisan Bistro was one of those hyper-pretentious airport establishments that charged $24 for a turkey sandwich, banking on a captive audience of business travelers with generous corporate cards. It looked relatively empty, a stark contrast to the overcrowded public seating areas. Isabella adjusted her leather tote bag heavy with proprietary documents and stepped across the threshold. The ambient noise of the airport instantly dropped, muffled by heavy architectural acoustics. She bypassed the bustling takeaway counter and headed toward a secluded velvet booth in the back corner, perfect for a few hours of uninterrupted work. She slid into the booth, pulled out her laptop, and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. A young waitress with a name tag that read Chloe briskly walked past her table 3 times, deliberately avoiding eye contact. Isabella watched as Chloe approached a white man in a rumpled suit who had just sat down 2 tables away instantly, offering him a menu and a sparkling water. Isabella raised a hand. "Excuse me, Miss..." Chloe paused, her smile instantly vanishing. She looked Isabella up and down, her eyes lingering on the oversized hoodie and the sweatpants. The disdain was barely concealed. "The public seating area is out in the concourse," Chloe said, her voice dripping with practiced condescension. Isabella blinked, her corporate instincts momentarily short-circuiting. "I'm aware of where the public seating is. I'd like to see a menu, please. I need an espresso and perhaps a sparkling water." "Right," Chloe said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "But this area is for paying patrons of the bistro, people who are actually ordering meals." "And I intend to be a paying patron," Isabella replied, her voice remaining perfectly level, though a familiar icy anger began to pool in her stomach. "Is there a minimum spend for this booth?" Before Chloe could answer, a man materialized from behind the gleaming espresso bar. He wore a sharply tailored, albeit cheap, navy suit, and his slicked-back hair caught the recessed lighting. His name tag identified him as Noah Galt, General Manager. "Is there a problem here, Chloe?" Noah asked, though he didn't look at the waitress. His pale blue eyes were locked entirely on Isabella. She was just asking for a menu, Chloe muttered, taking the opportunity to scurry away to the safety of the cash register. Noah clasped his hands behind his back, adopting a wide, authoritative stance. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to vacate the booth. We have reservations." Isabella looked around the sprawling, mostly empty restaurant. Reservations. In an airport terminal cafe. We have a partnership with several elite airline lounges. Noah lied smoothly, though his smug expression betrayed him. This section is reserved for their VIP members. If you want a coffee, you can wait in the takeaway line at the front. Isabella leaned back against the emerald velvet. She recognized this game. She had played it 1,000 times throughout her career, usually in boardrooms where men in suits underestimated her right up until the moment she dismantled their companies. "I travel quite a bit, Noah. I'm a Chairman's Circle member for 3 major airlines. None of them take reservations at L'Artisan Bistro." Noah's face tightened, a flush of pink creeping up his neck. The polite corporate facade began to slip, revealing the raw, ugly prejudice underneath. "Look, I don't know how you got past the host stand, but this is a high-end establishment. We don't allow people to just wander in off the concourse to use our Wi-Fi and sleep in our booths. It degrades the atmosphere for our actual clientele." "Your actual clientele," Isabella echoed softly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "And what exactly does your actual clientele look like, Noah?" "They look like people who belong here," Noah snapped, abandoning all pretense. He leaned over the table, invading her personal space. "Grab your bag and get out before I have airport security escort you out for loitering." Isabella didn't flinch. She simply stared into his eyes, her mind already shifting from the annoyance of a delayed flight to the cold, calculating mathematics of absolute destruction. The silence between them stretched thick and suffocating. A few nearby patrons had stopped eating, their eyes darting toward the confrontation. Isabella could see a woman at the next table holding up her phone, the red recording light faintly visible. Don't give them the angry black woman narrative, Isabella told herself, her breathing strictly controlled. Don't give them the viral video where you lose your temper. "I am not loitering," Isabella said, her tone conversational, almost pleasant. "I am attempting to patronize your business. You are refusing me service based on an assumption you have made about my appearance, and likely my race." "Don't pull that card with me," Noah hissed, looking around nervously at the sudden attention they were drawing. "You're dressed like a vagrant. We have a dress code." "A dress code at O'Hare Airport." Isabella raised an eyebrow. She pointed a manicured finger at a group of college students in the corner wearing pajama pants and flip-flops, laughing over a plate of overpriced fries. "Are you enforcing it over there, or is it just selectively applied to my booth?" Noah's jaw clenched. He spun around and signaled wildly toward the front entrance. Moments later, a heavy-set airport security guard with a tactical belt and a hesitant expression lumbered into the bistro. His badge read, "Officer Dempsey." "Dave, thank God," Noah said, adopting an immediate posture of victimhood. "This woman is refusing to leave the premises. She's causing a massive disturbance and harassing my staff." Officer Dempsey looked at Isabella. He saw a middle-aged woman, sitting quietly with a closed laptop, her hands folded neatly on the table. He looked confused. "Ma'am, is there an issue here?" "No issue, Officer Dempsey," Isabella said, offering the guard a polite, disarming smile. "I came in to order an espresso. Mr. Galt here has decided my money isn't good enough for his establishment and has fabricated a story about a VIP reservation system to force me out. When I questioned him, he threatened to have me removed for loitering." Dempsey shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his radio. He hated these calls. He looked at Noah, lowering his voice. "Rich, come on. She's just sitting there. Just let her buy a coffee." Absolutely not, Noah demanded, his ego now fully tied to winning this petty battle. I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. I want her trespassed from this restaurant. Now. Officer Dempsey sighed a heavy, tired sound. He turned back to Isabella, an apologetic look in his eyes. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if the manager asks you to leave, you have to leave. Otherwise, it technically becomes trespassing. I don't want to make this a whole thing. Isabella looked at Dempsey. She understood he was just a guy doing his job, caught in the crossfire of Noah Galt's fragile, racist ego. She had no intention of making Dempsey's life harder. I understand, officer, Isabella said smoothly. She packed her laptop into her leather tote with deliberate, unhurried movements. She slung the bag over her shoulder and stood up. Even in sneakers, she was tall, projecting a commanding presence that made Noah unconsciously take a step back. She walked slowly toward the exit, escorted by Dempsey, with Noah trailing close behind, a triumphant smirk plastered on his face. As they reached the boundary of the restaurant, where the marble floor met the terrible concourse carpet, Isabella stopped and turned to face the manager. You seem very proud of this little fiefdom of yours, Noah, Isabella said quietly. I run a tight ship, Noah sneered, crossing his arms. We maintain standards. Enjoy the food court. Who owns this franchise? Isabella asked. Noah laughed, a short, barking sound. Why are you going to call corporate? Write a bad Yelp review. Good luck. I'm a junior partner in the local ownership group, Midwest Culinary Partners. We hold a 10-year ironclad lease on this space. I am corporate. Isabella's eyes glinted. It was the only warning she gave. Midwest Culinary Partners. Good to know. And who do you lease the space from, Noah? The airport authority, obviously. Are we done here? You actually don't, Isabella corrected him, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The Chicago Aviation Authority leases the commercial zones to a master tenant holding company who then subleases to small-time operators like you. But I wouldn't expect a junior partner to understand the macroeconomic structure of his own roof. Noah frowned, his triumphant smirk faltering for a fraction of a second as confusion set in. Have a lovely afternoon, Noah, Isabella said. I have a feeling we'll be speaking again very soon. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. 10 minutes later, Isabella was seated in the private access-controlled sanctum of the American Airlines flagship First Lounge. A complimentary glass of sparkling water and a double espresso sat before her. She pulled out her phone and dialed a private New York number. It was answered on the first ring. Arthur, Isabella said, her voice completely devoid of the warmth she had shown the security guard. Arthur Pendleton, her chief legal officer and primary fixer, immediately recognized the tone. It was the tone that usually preceded a corporate bloodbath. Good afternoon, Josie. How was Seattle? Are you in the air? Delayed at O'Hare, Isabella replied, opening her laptop. Arthur, what is the current status of the O'Hare Retail Partners acquisition? The one we've been quietly negotiating for the past 6 months. We are in the final due diligence phase, Arthur replied, the sound of keyboard clacking echoing through the phone. We were scheduled to sign the final transfer of the master lease portfolio next Thursday. Why do you want to pause it? No, Isabella said, taking a slow sip of her espresso. I want to accelerate it. I want the ink dry by Monday morning. Offer them an extra 2% above, asking if they waive the final cooling-off period. Arthur paused. Josie, that's an extra $4 million. Over a weekend. Consider it a convenience fee. Understood. Is there a specific reason for the rush? Yes. Isabella murmured, her eyes locked on the screen as she pulled up the public business registry for the state of Illinois. There is a tenant in Terminal 3, a restaurant called L'Artisan Bistro, operated by Midwest Culinary Partners. I want a full forensic audit of their sublease. I want to know every late payment, every health code violation, every noise complaint, and every clause they've ever breached. By the time I land in London, I want a loaded gun waiting in my inbox." "You want to evict them?" Arthur asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Oh no," Isabella smiled, and it was a terrifying thing. "Eviction is too easy. I want to own them." 1 week later, Caldwell Holdings headquarters, Manhattan. The conference room on the 54th floor offered a panoramic view of Central Park, but nobody at the massive mahogany table was looking at the trees. The room was deathly silent as Isabella Caldwell, now back in her terrifyingly sharp Tom Ford armor, flipped through a thick, leather-bound dossier. Arthur Pendleton sat to her right, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. To her left sat Samantha Higgins, her ruthless director of acquisitions. "The ink dried on Monday as requested." Arthur began breaking the silence. "Caldwell Holdings is now the sole proprietor of the master lease for Terminals 1, 3, and 5 at O'Hare. We are officially the landlords for 142 retail and dining locations, including L'Artisan Bistro," Isabella said, not looking up from the dossier. "Especially them," Samantha chimed in, leaning forward. "Josie, this was a gold mine of incompetence. I had our forensic accounting team tear through Midwest Culinary Partners. Noah Galt wasn't lying. He is a junior partner. He bought in for 15% 3 years ago. But the senior partner, a man named Gregory Carmichael, is completely hands-off. He lives in Florida and lets Galt run the day-to-day." "And how is Mr. Galt doing with those day-to-day operations?" Isabella asked, tracing a manicured fingernail over a spreadsheet. "Abysmally," Arthur said, a predatory grin forming. "Their 10-year lease has a very strict brand standards and operations clause. It's standard for high-end airport retail to protect the prestige of the terminal. Galt has been cutting corners to inflate his quarterly profit sharing. He switched their coffee supplier from the mandated fair trade artisanal roaster to a cheap bulk commercial brand. He's been deferring essential maintenance on their grease traps, resulting in 2 quiet citations from the Aviation Authority. And most importantly, he has a habit of paying their monthly rent on a 10-day delay. Under the previous management, it was ignored because Carmichael is golf buddies with the old lease director." "But we don't play golf," Isabella stated softly. "No, we don't," Samantha agreed. Under Section 4, Clause 12 of their sublease, 3 consecutive late rent payments, combined with documented operational violations, gives the master leaseholder the right to initiate an immediate cure or quit notice. But given the severity of the grease trap citations, we can actually trigger the hostile reversion clause." Isabella looked up, her dark eyes locking onto Samantha. "Explain." "If a tenant's negligence poses a risk to the infrastructure of the terminal, which a neglected commercial grease trap certainly does, the landlord can terminate the lease with 0 days' notice, seize the physical assets inside the property to cover remediation costs, and assume total control of the space." Isabella leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. The memory of Noah Galt's smug face, the way he had looked at her, as if she were dirt on his shoes, flashed in her mind. He had thought he was untouchable behind his velvet ropes. "I don't just want the space," Isabella said, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. "I want to make an example. Caldwell Holdings has been looking for a flagship location to launch our own boutique hospitality brand. Something modern, inclusive, and genuinely high-end. I want to build a coffee house, Caldwell Coffee." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "You want to replace his bistro with your own brand?" "I want to gut his bistro," Isabella corrected. "I want him to watch it happen. Here is the play, Arthur. Do not send the termination notice by mail. We wait until the end of the month. I am flying back through Chicago on the 28th. We will serve him the papers in person. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Noah Galt was having an excellent month. The holiday travel season was picking up, and the captive audience of Terminal 3 was practically throwing money at him. He strutted through L'Artisan Bistro, barking orders at Chloe and the rest of the exhausted staff. He felt invincible. He was in the back office tallying up the weekly receipts and skimming his usual personal bonus from the cash drawer when his phone buzzed. It was Gregory Carmichael, the senior partner. "Greg, my man," Noah answered smoothly. "Numbers are up 12% this week. The terminal is packed." "Noah," Gregory's voice sounded tight, strained. "Did you pay the rent on the 1st of the month?" Noah rolled his eyes. "I authorized the transfer on the 10th, same as always. Gives us a little float for payroll." Why did O'Hare Retail Partners call crying about it? O'Hare Retail Partners doesn't exist anymore. Gregory snapped, panic bleeding into his voice. They were bought out. The master lease was acquired by a private equity firm in New York, Caldwell Holdings. "Have you heard of them?" Noah frowned, a cold, unfamiliar sense of dread suddenly pooling in his gut. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. "No." "Why does it matter who collects the check?" "Because their legal department just sent me a certified letter." Gregory said, his breathing heavy. "They are auditing every single tenant. And Noah, they found the maintenance logs. They found the citations on the grease traps you told me you fixed." "It's fine, Greg, relax." Noah lied, his heart rate spiking. "It's just corporate posturing. New landlords always flex their muscles. I'll call their property manager tomorrow and smooth it out. Send them a gift basket." "You don't send gift baskets to Caldwell Holdings," Gregory yelled through the phone. "They are corporate apex predators, Noah." The letter states they are conducting a mandatory in-person operational compliance inspection next Friday at noon. The CEO of the holding company is flying in personally to conduct it. "The CEO," Noah scoffed, trying to regain his bravado. "A billionaire CEO is flying to Chicago to inspect a bistro kitchen. Give me a break." "Clean the place up, Noah," Gregory warned, his voice deadly serious. "If we lose this lease, I will personally sue you for every dime you have." The line went dead. Noah stared at his phone, his bravado entirely stripped away. He looked out the small office window at his gleaming bistro, the velvet booths, the polished brass. He was the king of this little castle. No New York suit was going to take it away from him. He had no idea that the New York suit coming for him was the very same woman he had thrown out like trash just 2 weeks prior. And she wasn't bringing a gift basket. She was bringing a guillotine. Friday morning at O'Hare's Terminal 3 felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Inside L'Artisan Bistro, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Noah Galt had been at the airport since 3 in the morning, frantically barking orders at his severely sleep-deprived staff. Every brass fixture had been polished until it gleamed, every velvet cushion aggressively lint-rolled, and the usually cluttered espresso station was arranged with geometric precision. "Chloe, I swear to God, if I see a single water spot on those wine glasses, you are fired." Noah snapped, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. He aggressively straightened his tie, a silk Armani knockoff he had bought specifically for today. Chloe rolled her eyes, exhausted, but quickly grabbed a microfiber cloth to re-wipe the impeccably clean glassware. At 11:30, a breathless Gregory Carmichael rolled his luxury carry-on suitcase through the front entrance. The senior partner of Midwest Culinary Partners looked like a man who was about to face a firing squad. His Florida tan clashed violently with the pale, sickly shade of his face. "Greg, you made it," Noah said, marching over and forcing a confident smile. "Look around. Place is spotless. Whatever this Caldwell Holdings CEO wants to see, we are ready. It's just a shakedown for a higher lease rate. I've handled guys like this before." Gregory leaned heavily on the host stand, gasping for air. "You don't understand, Noah. I made some calls to my contacts in Manhattan. Isabella Caldwell isn't just a landlord, she's a corporate shark. They call her the executioner on Wall Street. She doesn't renegotiate. She liquidates. If she finds one thing out of place, we are ruined. She's just a suit." Noah scoffed his arrogance, attempting to mask a rising tide of panic. "I run a tight ship. Let her come." Promptly at noon, the ambient noise of the terminal seemed to physically dip. Approaching the bistro was not a single disgruntled landlord, but a highly coordinated phalanx of corporate power. Leading the charge was a team of 4 attorneys in impeccable charcoal suits, each carrying thick leather-bound portfolios. Flanking them were 2 men in high-vis vests, structural engineers contracted by the airport authority. But it was the woman walking at the center of the formation who commanded absolute terrifying authority. Isabella Caldwell was no longer wearing heather gray sweatpants or an oversized hoodie. She was draped in a razor-sharp, bespoke Tom Ford suit in deep obsidian tailored to millimeter perfection. A silk emerald blouse echoed the color of the bistro's velvet booths, a deliberate, mocking, sartorial choice. Her Cartier watch caught the terminal lighting, flashing like a warning beacon. Noah's confident smile froze, then slowly disintegrated. The blood drained from his face so rapidly he felt lightheaded. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His brain violently rejected the visual information it was receiving, frantically trying to reconcile the billionaire CEO standing before him with the casually dressed black woman he had ruthlessly humiliated and kicked out into the concourse 2 weeks prior. Isabella stopped directly in front of the host stand. She slowly removed her designer sunglasses, folding them with a crisp snap that echoed through the eerily quiet restaurant. Her dark eyes locked onto Noah's pale blue ones. There was no rage in her expression. There was only absolute glacial certainty. "Good afternoon, Noah," Isabella said smoothly, her voice carrying effortlessly across the dining room. "I told you we would be speaking again very soon." Gregory, entirely oblivious to the catastrophic history between the two, aggressively shoved past Noah, extending a trembling, sweaty hand. "Ms. Caldwell, what an honor. Gregory Carmichael, senior partner. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome you to our flagship location. As you can see, we maintain the highest standards of luxury, and save your breath, Mr. Carmichael." Isabella interrupted, not looking at him, refusing his hand. Her gaze remained rigidly fixed on Noah, who was now visibly trembling. "Mr. Galt and I have already established his particular brand of hospitality. Arthur, hand them the audit." Arthur Pendleton stepped forward, a predatory smirk playing on his lips, and dropped a massive 300-page binder onto the host stand. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. "What is this?" Gregory stammered, looking at the binder as if it were an explosive device. "That," Isabella said, finally, stepping past the boundary of the restaurant and running a finger along the polished brass divider, "is the autopsy of your business." The dining room had been cleared of customers for the inspection, leaving only the terrified staff huddled near the kitchen doors and the imposing presence of the Caldwell Holdings team. Isabella commanded the space, entirely taking a seat at the exact same corner booth she had been evicted from weeks earlier. She gestured for Gregory and a catatonic Noah to stand before her. "Let us dispense with the pleasantries." Isabella began opening a slim leather portfolio on the table. "Caldwell Holdings acquired the master lease for this terminal 4 days ago. Upon our initial financial review, it became abundantly clear that Midwest Culinary Partners is operating in gross violation of your sublease. "Miss Caldwell, please," Gregory pleaded, his voice cracking. "If this is about the late rent, I assure you it was a clerical error. We have the capital. We can pay a penalty fee." "The rent is merely a symptom of a terminal disease, Gregory," Isabella corrected sharply. She nodded to Arthur, who opened the massive binder. Arthur adjusted his glasses and began reciting the charges with lethal precision. "According to Section 4, Clause 12 of your operating agreement, your establishment is required to maintain specific brand standards to reflect the premium tier of Terminal 3. You are contractually obligated to use certified fair trade ingredients." Arthur pulled out a stack of invoices. "Yet for the last 14 months, Mr. Galt has been purchasing commercial-grade discount coffee beans and relabeling them in your custom bags, pocketing the 70% markup." Gregory slowly turned to look at Noah, his eyes widening in horror. "Noah, what did you do?" "It's a standard margin improvement tactic." Noah finally croaked, his voice defensive, though his bravado was gone. "Everyone in the terminal does it. Nobody can taste the difference. Your customers might not have tasted it, but our forensic accountants certainly did." Isabella replied, her tone dripping with disdain. "Fraudulent labeling on a premium lease is a Class A violation, but that is child's play compared to your infrastructure negligence." Isabella snapped her fingers. The two structural engineers stepped forward. "Mr. Carmichael, are you aware of the condition of your primary commercial grease traps?" Isabella asked. "They were serviced last quarter," Gregory stammered, looking desperately at his junior partner. Noah submitted the maintenance receipts to the old lease director. "Forged receipts," Arthur corrected. "Our engineers conducted an overnight thermal scan of the plumbing infrastructure below this sector. Your grease traps haven't been professionally evacuated in nearly 18 months. They are currently at 96% capacity, leaking highly flammable lipids into the subfloor ventilation shafts. You are operating a critical fire hazard." Gregory's knees buckled slightly. He gripped the edge of a nearby table to steady himself. "I didn't know. I swear to you, Miss Caldwell, I am a silent partner. I live in Boca. Ignorance is not a legal defense in commercial real estate," Isabella stated coldly. Noah backed into a corner and, watching his entire livelihood evaporate, suddenly snapped. The red flush of anger returned to his neck. He pointed an accusatory finger at Isabella. "This is personal," Noah yelled, his voice echoing loudly. "You don't care about the grease traps. You're just doing this because of what happened 2 weeks ago. You came in here looking like a bum, and I threw you out. This is retaliation." The room went dead silent. Chloe and the rest of the staff gasped, finally understanding the context of the tension. Gregory looked like he was about to faint. Isabella didn't blink. She let the silence stretch, forcing Noah to sit in the echoes of his own pathetic outburst. "Retaliation," Isabella said softly, dangerously. "Mr. Galt, if I wanted personal retaliation, I would have simply bought your franchise and fired you. But I am a businesswoman. I don't act on emotion. I act on data. The data shows you are a liability to my multi-billion-dollar real estate portfolio. You degraded the integrity of this building long before I ever walked through those doors." She stood up, towering in her tailored suit, and approached him. "You judged me based on my clothes and my skin. You assumed I was powerless. But your failure here today isn't because I am powerful. It is because you are deeply, fundamentally incompetent at your job. I am just the auditor who caught you." Isabella turned her attention entirely to Gregory, ignoring Noah as if he were a speck of dust. Mr. Carmichael, due to the critical fire hazard posed by your unmaintained infrastructure, Caldwell Holdings is officially triggering the hostile reversion clause outlined in Section 9 of your contract. No, please, Gregory begged, tears welling in his eyes. That means your lease is terminated immediately, effective 00 hours, Arthur interjected, slapping a formal legal decree onto the table. All physical assets within this footprint, the espresso machines, the furniture, the fixtures, the inventory are hereby seized by Caldwell Holdings to cover the remediation costs of the biohazardous plumbing you created. You can't do that, Noah screamed, lunging forward. I own 15% of this. That espresso machine alone is worth 40 grand. You can't just steal my property. It isn't yours anymore, Noah, Isabella said, delivering the final blow. It belongs to me. You have exactly 60 minutes to collect your personal effects and vacate the premises, Arthur stated, tapping his watch. After that, you will be considered trespassers on private property. I'm not going anywhere, Noah roared, slamming his fist onto a marble table. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the aviation authority. You are not taking my restaurant. Isabella casually checked her gold Cartier watch. I anticipated this reaction, which is why I took the liberty of contacting terminal security in advance. Right on cue, heavy footsteps echoed from the concourse. Pushing through the gathered crowd of onlookers was a familiar face, Officer Dempsey. He was accompanied by 3 other heavily armed airport police officers. Dempsey paused as he entered the bistro, taking in the scene. He looked at the impeccably dressed legal team, the weeping senior partner, the hyperventilating manager, and finally the stunningly powerful woman orchestrating it all. Recognition sparked in Dempsey's eyes. A slow, deeply satisfied smile spread across his face. Officer Dempsey, Isabella greeted him warmly. It is a pleasure to see you again. Mr. Galt is refusing to vacate a terminated commercial lease and is currently trespassing on my property. Could you kindly assist him in finding the exit? With absolute pleasure, ma'am, Dempsey said, his voice ringing with authority. He unclipped a set of zip ties from his tactical belt, just for theatrical effect, and marched straight toward Noah. Dave, you can't be serious, Noah pleaded, backing away. She's stealing my business. Arrest her. Let's go, Rich, Dempsey said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He grabbed Noah by the bicep in a vice-like grip. Grab your coat. You're done here. As Dempsey manhandled Noah toward the back office to retrieve his coat, Gregory Carmichael was feverishly signing the asset surrender documents, his hand shaking so violently he tore the paper. He knew a protracted legal battle with Caldwell Holdings would bankrupt him entirely. He surrendered everything just to escape with his personal savings intact. Within 20 minutes, Gregory was gone, fleeing toward the terminal exits without looking back. Noah emerged from the back office, his cheap navy suit wrinkled, clutching a small cardboard box containing a framed photo and a half-empty bottle of cheap scotch. Dempsey and the other officers formed a tight perimeter around him, escorting him toward the front of the restaurant. As Noah reached the boundary where the marble floor met the terrible concourse carpet, the exact spot where he had mocked Isabella 2 weeks ago, she stepped into his path. Enjoy the food court, Noah, Isabella said, throwing his exact words back at him with devastating precision. Noah's face twisted in helpless fury, but he said nothing. He was marched out into the concourse, the very public humiliation he had inflicted on Isabella now magnified 100-fold, as hundreds of travelers stopped to watch the arrogant manager being perp-walked out of his own domain. With Noah gone, the bistro descended into an eerie quiet. The remaining staff, including Chloe, stood frozen near the espresso machines, waiting for the axe to fall on them. Isabella walked slowly toward the bar, She looked at Chloe, who flinched, expecting to be verbally eviscerated. "Chloe, is it?" Isabella asked, reading the name tag. "Yes, ma'am. Please, I'm so sorry about before. I was just following his orders. I need this job to pay for nursing school." Chloe was visibly trembling, bracing for termination. Isabella studied the young woman. She knew what it was like to be trapped under the thumb of a toxic, tyrannical manager. She also knew the difference between systemic malice and basic survival in a bad workplace. "I don't hold the actions of a terrible general manager against his hourly employees," Isabella said, her tone softening considerably. "Caldwell Holdings is retaining the lease on this space. We are gutting it and launching a flagship artisanal coffee brand. The renovation will take approximately 30 days. Chloe swallowed hard. "So, we're laid off?" "No," Isabella replied. She gestured to Samantha Higgins, who pulled a stack of pristine white envelopes from her briefcase. "You're all officially employees of Caldwell Hospitality. You will be paid your full hourly rate for the next 30 days while the store is closed for construction. When we reopen, your base pay will increase by $4 an hour, and you will receive full medical benefits. Consider it a signing bonus." Chloe burst into tears of relief, covering her mouth, as Samantha handed her an envelope containing her new employment contract. The rest of the staff erupted into quiet cheers, the oppressive shadow of Noah Galt instantly lifted from their shoulders. "However," Isabella added, raising a finger, bringing the room back to a hushed silence, "if I ever catch any of you judging a customer by the clothes on their back or the color of their skin, the consequences will be significantly less pleasant than what Mr. Galt just experienced. Do we have an understanding?" "Yes, Ms. Caldwell," they chorused in unison, genuine respect glowing in their eyes. "Excellent." Isabella turned to the structural engineers. "Tear down the signage. Today." By 4 o'clock that afternoon, a massive construction barricade had been erected around the former L'Artisan Bistro. The emerald velvet booths were being hauled away to a liquidation center. But the most satisfying moment came just as Isabella was walking toward her gate to finally catch her flight. She paused in the concourse and watched as 2 workers on scaffolding took crowbars to the pretentious gold leaf L'Artisan sign above the entrance. With a loud metallic shriek, the L and the A were pried off the wall, crashing onto the marble floor below. The erasure of Noah Galt's legacy had officially begun, making way for an empire built on respect, precision, and an absolutely lethal sense of justice. Behind the floor-to-ceiling plywood barricades in Terminal 3, a small army of union contractors worked around the clock in 3 synchronized shifts. The scent of stale grease and cheap espresso that had haunted the corner of the concourse was violently scrubbed away, replaced by the smell of fresh plaster, cut African mahogany, and ozone from welding torches. Isabella Caldwell did not just want a renovation, she wanted an exorcism. But out in the sprawling suburbs of Chicago, Noah Galt was refusing to stay buried. Unemployed, facing personal bankruptcy after Gregory Carmichael sued him for breach of fiduciary duty, and nursing a bruised ego that bordered on delusion, Noah decided to play his final desperate card. He was going to wage a public relations war. Sitting in his cramped, dimly lit apartment in Naperville, Noah furiously typed out an email to Sarah Jenkins, an investigative business reporter for the Chicago Chronicle. His pitch was a classic, irresistible David versus Goliath narrative. A ruthless, out-of-town billionaire corporate raider had swooped into Chicago, used predatory legal loopholes to steal a thriving local business from a hard-working manager and thrown him onto the street just before the holidays. He omitted, of course, the fraud, the fire hazards, and his own blatant racism. Sarah Jenkins took the bait. A seasoned journalist with a nose for corporate overreach, she immediately requested an on-the-record interview with Caldwell Holdings to confront them with Noah's allegations. When the media inquiry landed in Arthur Pendleton's inbox in Manhattan, the chief legal officer didn't panic. He smiled. He walked down the glass-paneled hallway to Isabella's corner office and handed her the printed email. Isabella read it over her expression, unreadable. Mr. Gort is remarkably persistent in his own self-destruction. He wants to take this to the press. It appears so, Arthur replied, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Miss Jenkins is threatening to run the story in the Sunday edition. Billionaire bully evicts local hero. It's bad optics for the launch of the new brand. Optics only matter when the glass is dirty. Arthur, Isabella said, turning her chair toward the expansive view of Central Park. Invite Miss Jenkins to our Chicago field office. Do not deny anything. In fact, offer her exclusive unfettered access to the entire acquisition file. 2 days later, Sarah Jenkins sat in a sleek, glass-walled conference room in downtown Chicago, an audio recorder placed on the table. Arthur Pendleton sat across from her, flanked by 2 forensic accountants. Mr. Pendleton Noah Galt claims Caldwell Holdings orchestrated a hostile takeover of his lease purely as a vanity project for your CEO, using fabricated maintenance issues as a pretext. Sarah began, her pen poised over her notepad. Arthur didn't say a word. He simply slid a sleek silver tablet across the table. On the screen was a high-resolution thermal imaging video taken by the structural engineers. What you are looking at, Ms. Jenkins, is a subterranean view of Terminal 3, Arthur explained smoothly. Those glowing red masses are 96% full grease traps, leaking highly volatile lipids directly into the airport's main HVAC system. Mr. Galt forged the maintenance logs for 18 months to pocket the service fees. If a stray spark from the kitchen had ignited that vapor, a significant portion of the terminal would have been structurally compromised. Sarah's eyes widened. She slowly lowered her pen. Arthur then slid a second file across the table. Here are the invoices proving Mr. Galt was purchasing commercial-grade, pesticide-heavy coffee beans for $3 a pound, repackaging them in custom bags, and selling them to travelers as certified organic fair trade for $24 a cup. He defrauded his customers, his senior partner, and the Chicago Aviation Authority. "My God," Sarah whispered, scrolling through the damning evidence. "He told me he was running a flawless operation." Mr. Galt's definition of flawless is heavily dependent on nobody looking beneath the surface, Arthur noted dryly. Caldwell Holdings didn't steal a business. We neutralized a hazard. You are welcome to publish his allegations, Ms. Jenkins. But if you do, we will publish this entire dossier, and your journalistic credibility will burn down alongside his. Sarah Jenkins was a professional. She knew when she had been fed a fabricated sob story. I won't be publishing his allegations, Mr. Pendleton, but I would very much like to write an exclusive piece on this audit. This is a massive exposure of consumer fraud. When the Sunday edition of the Chicago Chronicle hit the newsstands, Noah Galt's name was on the front page of the business section, but not as the victim. The headline read, "The Terminal Swindler, How One Manager Defrauded Travelers and Ignored Catastrophic Fire Hazards." The article detailed every forged invoice, every bypassed safety regulation, and every penny stolen. By noon that Sunday, Noah's phone was ringing off the hook, but it wasn't reporters offering sympathy. It was the Chicago Restaurant Association, formally revoking his membership. It was his landlord demanding immediate payment. It was the end of his career in the hospitality industry forever. He was radioactive. No restaurant, hotel, or bar in the state of Illinois would ever hire him again. Part 8. Neon Justice. 30 days exactly from the moment the barricades went up, they came down. Terminal 3 was buzzing with the manic energy of a Friday morning travel rush. Travelers who regularly passed through the concourse stopped dead in their tracks, staring at the corner where the stuffy, velvet-draped L'Artisan bistro used to sit. The space was unrecognizable. It had been transformed into an architectural masterpiece of warm, inclusive luxury. The walls were clad in slatted African mahogany and exposed whitewashed brick. The oppressive velvet booths were gone, replaced by sprawling communal work tables made from reclaimed oak, featuring built-in wireless charging pads and sleek, low-profile reading lamps. Lush, vibrant greenery cascaded from suspended brushed copper planters, breathing actual life into the sterile airport air. Behind a sweeping white marble counter, state-of-the-art Italian espresso machines gleamed under the soft lighting. The scent of genuine, ethically sourced Ethiopian Yirgacheffe coffee wafted through the terminal, drawing a line of eager travelers that stretched into the concourse. At the center of it all was Chloe. She wasn't wearing a cheap polyester uniform anymore. She wore a crisp, tailored black apron over a white Oxford shirt. A silver pin on her lapel read, "Shift Manager." She moved with a confidence and grace she had never been allowed to show under Noah's tyrannical rule, expertly directing her well-paid, medically insured staff as they efficiently cleared the massive line. At precisely 8 in the morning, a black town car pulled up to the curb outside departures. Isabella Caldwell stepped out. She wore a striking crimson power suit, today a stark contrast to the casual wear she had worn on her first fateful visit. As she walked through the terminal flanked by Arthur and Samantha, heads turned. The article in the Chronicle had included her photograph, and several business travelers recognized the titan of industry walking among them. Isabella bypassed the line and walked directly up to the marble counter. Chloe looked up from the register, her face immediately breaking into a massive, genuine smile. "Ms. Caldwell." Chloe beamed. "Welcome back. Everything is running perfectly. We've done triple the volume of the old bistro in the first 2 hours alone." "I never doubted you for a moment, Chloe." Isabella smiled warmly. "The space looks phenomenal. How is the new equipment? Incredible. And the beans. I've never tasted anything like it," Chloe said. "What can I get for you?" "Just a strong black espresso, please, and a sparkling water." As Chloe turned to pull the shot herself, Isabella stepped back and looked up at the space above the entrance. The spot where the pretentious gold-leaf letters had once hung was empty, waiting for the final touch. A team of electricians stood by on a scissor lift. Isabella gave them a single sharp nod. With the flick of a heavy breaker switch, a massive custom-fabricated neon sign roared to life, casting a warm amber glow across the marble floors of the concourse. The name of the flagship establishment was finally revealed. Caldwell Reserve. It was a permanent, glowing monument to consequence. As Isabella took her espresso cup from Chloe, thanking her, she turned to survey the concourse. Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd of rushing passengers, flight attendants, and pilots. Then she saw him. About 50 feet away, near a bank of overflowing trash receptacles, a man was aggressively pushing a heavy grey plastic sanitation cart. He wore a baggy industrial grey jumpsuit with a neon yellow reflective vest. His slicked-back hair was gone, hidden beneath a cheap, sweat-stained baseball cap. Because Noah Galt had been blacklisted from every food and beverage establishment in the state and heavily burdened by crushing legal debts, he had been forced to take the only union job that didn't require a hospitality background check. He was a third-shift custodial worker for the Aviation Authority. Noah paused, leaning heavily on the handle of his mop bucket, and looked up. He stared at the gleaming, luxurious expanse of Caldwell Reserve. He looked at the line of wealthy travelers eagerly spending their money. He looked at Chloe, the waitress he used to verbally abuse, confidently managing a team of 6. And then his eyes drifted upward, locking onto the glowing amber neon sign bearing the name of the woman he had kicked out into the cold. Slowly, Noah's gaze lowered until it met Isabella Caldwell's. She stood at the edge of the cafe holding her espresso. She didn't smirk. She didn't point or laugh. She simply looked at him with the cold, immovable gaze of a mountain staring down at a pebble. She raised her espresso cup a fraction of an inch in a silent, utterly devastating toast. Noah swallowed hard, his face pale and hollowed out. He looked down at his grey jumpsuit, tightened his grip on his mop, and quickly pushed his cart around the corner, disappearing into the shadows of the concourse, entirely erased from the world he once thought he ruled. Isabella took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of her coffee. It was rich, complex, and perfectly extracted. She turned back to her team, her mind already shifting to the next acquisition, the next boardroom, the next empire to conquer. But as she walked to her gate, finally ready to board her flight to London, she knew one thing for certain. Coffee had never tasted this good. Never underestimate the person sitting quietly in the corner, because the very ground you stand on might just belong to them. Isabella Caldwell proved that true power doesn't need to shout to be heard. It simply buys the microphone, changes the locks, and lights up its own name in neon. Noah Gort learned the hard way that arrogance is the fastest path to the mop bucket. If you loved watching this billionaire CEO serve up a piping hot cup of absolute justice, smash that like button, share this video with someone who hates corporate bullies, and subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable real-life revenge stories.